On today's episode of the Pretend GM, I got to sit down with Andrew Cooper of Fantasy Alarm. Not only is he an award-winning fantasy football writer, but he is also the tight end whisperer of the fantasy football industry. This was one of the best guests that I've had so far on the show. He gave such in-depth and contextualized answers. It made me feel like a better fantasy analyst by the end of it, and I know it's going to make you a better fantasy football manager. Just like you and me, Andrew Cooper is a Pretend GM. So what I love to do with this show is every time I start this, I like to remind the audience and let the guests know the whole idea of Pretend GM is to try to bridge the gap between the analysts who do this for a living and the people who are playing, right? And it's not just like, okay, here are your answers. Here are your players to draft. Here are your players to start, your waiver wires, your trades, your sleepers, all that. Instead of giving a man a fish, I want to teach a man to fish type deal here. And let's go like into the thought process of Andrew Cooper, and let's go into what your perspective is and why you make the decisions you do. So I always like to start this off with an easy one sentence type answer. If you had to sum up your fantasy philosophy in one sentence, what would that be?
I mean, for me, I can actually give you an acronym. Even shorter than sentence.
I love this.
Even shorter than
first person to drop an acronym on here. Let's go.
Yes. So it's actually SORT, a short acronym, SORT. And it really applies to Dynasty. That's where I first came up with it. But it also applies to redraft too. And that's start, opportunity, roster, talent. So you're going to want to get as many talented players on your team as possible. That's where the breakouts come from. But opportunity is king. We need those targets. We need the snaps. We need those situations. So basically what we're doing here is we're collecting as many talented players as possible, but you need to have guys with an opportunity to start in your lineup. So that SORT acronym, Dynasty definitely, right? Because you're waiting for the window of opportunity. You're waiting for Zach Ertz to get hurt so Trey McBride can step up, right? You know he's talented. You need the opportunity, but you're going to lose a lot of games if you just have a bunch of talented players that are waiting for their chance. So you got to have the opportunity.
Do you tap that sign on the way into your office every morning?
That's right. Yeah, like the Notre Dame Believe, right? Just there we go.
Yeah, man, it's perfect.
Play like a champion today
so much.
I believe is Ted Lasso.
yeah, it's okay. It's the same.
A lot of signs out
Notre Dame. It's all the same. Just now there's a third sign out there. Sort everybody.
That's right.
So I knew you were going to do it. Within your first answer, you brought up tight ends.
Of course.
And now I got to ask you about tight ends. I don't want to put words into your mouth or other people's mouths, but around the fantasy industry, you are known as the tight end guy, and it's nothing to do with your shapely tight end that you have. It's all about I know. It's all about like, dude, you're kind of the tight end whisperer. You're the guru. How did that happen? How did that become, I don't want to say your thing because you're not just that, but like, how did this become something you were known for?
Yeah. And that's the thing. A lot of people, you get pigeonholed. Everyone does the certain things that they do. But like for me, people sometimes will have me on shows just as a side note, and they'll be like, oh, we're going to do other stuff and not talk tight ends because you pretty much always do that. And for me, I'm like, we could talk about it all, and we should talk about tight ends because I love talking about tight ends. That's my favorite, So actually, when I joined Fantasy Alarm a while back, I was working on a side project on figuring out tight ends, like some things that a lot of people weren't looking at that I thought were important. And I put together this big spreadsheet and everything. But at the time, Howard Bender was the tight end whisperer. That was his name. Everyone called Howard Bender the tight end whisperer. And so I sent him the spreadsheet and I said, here you go, dude. This could help you with your tight end stuff this year. And he reached back out to me and he goes, you're doing tight ends this year. And I was like, well, what are you going to do?
Wow.
And I was like, what are you going to do? And he goes, well, what position were you going to do? And I was like, I think I was supposed to do running backs. He goes, all right, I'm doing the running backs this year. You're doing the tight ends. And luckily enough, we put together a big guide, and we were looking at things that now a lot more people are looking at, like pass block percentage for figuring out what a young tight end's role is going to be later on. Is it going to be a blocking tight end? Is it going to be a pass catching tight end? Things like that. Looking at really putting emphasis on athleticism and 40 time and things like that. But luckily for us, that within that first year or so, two guys that we were big on were based on that new information was Mark Andrews and Darren Waller. And that really it just ended up being the perfect year for what we were doing, which was like, look for guys like Mark Andrews basically was playing every snap at wide receiver. He was never pass blocking. So even though he had a very small role alongside Nick Boyle and Hayden Hurst, if his role grew, he could break out in a big way. And then we're looking at Darren Waller and this 40 time, the fact that he was a converted wide receiver. And these are the things that we started looking at the time And it just so happened that it hit just right, and then people caught notice, and it kind of flew from there, man.
I know I don't typically like to talk specific players, and we're already going to go off script here within the first few minutes of the show. Has there been a player where it's like they kind of broke the mold here? Someone, they had all the qualifiers, all the metrics you look for, and then it just didn't work out, sort of the great white buffalo for you?
There's been both sides. There's been both sides. There's been guys that fit all the conditions but don't hit the way we think. And then there's been guys that are just unicorns that break the rules. So Mike Gesicki is an example of a guy who, like, this guy's a freak athlete. He was, like in high school, he played every sport. He could have, if professional volleyball played more money, he could have done that. He was a nasty basketball player, basically a big wide receiver, but he just couldn't, he wasn't a better wide receiver than the wide receivers. So that was one that didn't pan out. And then one that really broke the mold, that continues to break the mold and ruin the spreadsheets, is George Kittle, because there's only been 3 tight ends to pass block on more than 15% of their pass snaps, which is, if you really think about it, it's a lot. It's like you're capping your route. Let's say you play every snap, your route participation is capped at 85 if you're blocking on 15% of your pass plays, right? So like George Kittle had a top 5 season while blocking on 16% of his pass plays one year. And I've only seen that 2 other times since I've been doing this. Rob Gronkowski, in a year where he caught like 11 touchdowns in 10 games and then got hurt. And Julius Thomas, if you remember Orange Julius,
wow, yep.
He caught 13 touchdown passes in a year that Peyton Manning threw 55. So like that's a guy where a lot of the metrics, and the thing is, we just have to accept that the metrics aren't wrong. This guy's just a freak.
There's always going to be these outliers, right?
Right.
Like the common theme through every single guest I've had on here is that there's no perfect stat, there's no perfect metric, there's no perfect formula, there's no skeleton key, right? There are things that become more likely to happen, which, I mean, that's our job, is to figure out what is most likely to happen and help people fit that. But I think a lot of people that play fantasy football try to find the thing that's going to make them have all the answers and not have to work hard at it anymore. But that takes the fun out of the game, right? Like that's the point of the game, is to try to figure it out. It's like playing Clue, but you already know who did it right at the beginning.
Right.
It's not the game, man.
It's not the game.
Andrew, I know that everyone sort of has a cool backstory or a skill set or something that just got them into fantasy football. What was that thing that maybe prior to fantasy football got you into the industry and then has kind of helped shape the way you do your job here?
At the very core of me starting doing this, it actually stems from stubbornness to some degree. Where
I love it.
I started out on like my first actual analysis happened on Reddit, where I would get into those Reddit threads and basically just get into arguments, to be honest. And like, one person saying one thing and I believe something different. And next thing you know, I got this ongoing chain going on one screen, and on my other screen, I'm looking up stats and I'm looking up data and I'm saying, no, here's why you're wrong. Right. Or at the end of the day, I do the research and I say, hey, you know what, dude, I actually just looked this up and you're right. And after doing that for a while, people would respond to some of the comments and be like, this should be its own post. Like you should post this as its own thing. And then we can all comment because it's good information, but people aren't going to see it here. So I started doing that. And then I started doing articles kind of that way, like just free articles on Reddit essentially. And then I used that as my portfolio to get a job writing for a website. And at the time you weren't allowed to post your own things there, but I'd been there so long that I basically just reached out to the moderators. I was like, look, this is the same information I always post. It's just now on a website. So I'm going to share that. I kind of opened the door to let people doing that. And now the moderators understand that like an actual analyst want to be part of the community. And now they let people who are part of the community post things. But like, that's how I got into this and got started, was just being very annoying online.
Andrew Cooper, trailblazer for everybody on Reddit. I love it, man. That's a really cool way to get into this. I know a couple other people, my co-host over at Football Guys, Dave Kluge, same thing. He was doing a lot of stuff on Reddit.
Oh, yeah, he's an OG. He's an OG on those Reddit streets.
Yeah, man. I know you mentioned being stubborn is the thing that actually got you into the industry, but I can also imagine that sometimes can be a challenge. Was that, or maybe something else? Did you find there was a big challenge for you along the way that you're like, okay, I really need to learn from this if I want to get better as a fantasy football analyst?
Yeah, I mean, early on for me, The one thing that I did not understand was the most precious commodity, uh, more than the access to stats, more than the access to uh, people you know in the industry, more than hard work is time.
Mm.
Time is your most precious commodity here because you can work super hard on things that people don't care about. And if you don't allocate your time properly, you're going to end up being a mess. I mean, when I first started doing this, I was appraising commercial properties, and those deals have pretty strict deadlines. But believe it or not, they aren't as strict as the football deadlines. Like you can
Right.
technically move, yeah, $10 million property. You can technically move the closing date. I can't move Tuesday waivers. I can't move Thursday night football. So at the time, I used to go in and I would go in super early. Like let's say it's a Tuesday, I'd go in super early. I'd start a report and get as much of it done as possible so that I had something to show. And then I would switch over to my football stuff and get that done. And then I would actually have a sleeping bag with me. What I would do is I'd work until like midnight and then I would sleep in the office and then wake up at like 3 or 4 and finish my reports just
Oh,
because
it's
I had the
wild.
overlapping deadlines of two of the worst possible jobs you could have at the time. And then later I had a little more of a cushy job once I left that one, and eventually left all those jobs. But like you realize that you have to sit back and ask yourself, what is important that I'm doing and what's not, and what do my people actually want, right? Because you've got different levels of people that want your content. You've got there's casual gamers that just want rankings, they just want the answers, but then there's a whole group of our subscribers and stuff that want in-depth stuff. They want to be better, and you have to balance all that to provide everybody what they want. And I've had to cut things that I love doing for things that I don't necessarily love as much because it's not about me. It's about what our family, our members, what they want.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Like, I don't think enough people, and this is not first like grandstand here about how much work goes into it, but I don't think enough people realize how much work goes into the analysis of this. It's not throwing darts at a board. It's not just guessing and like walking away from the screen and, oh well, I hope everyone loses.
Right.
Like there's a lot. I haven't heard a story from anyone that got into the industry and started doing this and shaping their analytical process by saying like, hey, I just sat down one day and just said, F it. I'm gonna make some rankings. Like everyone has gone through something. Like, dude, sleeping at the office
Right.
is like that's hard work, man. Like that is a grind that not everyone's willing to put in. Now, I know I asked you about like what the common mistake that maybe you made early on or the struggle that you had going into the industry, but what about fantasy managers? What is the most common mistake? Because I know you talk about like giving them what they want, what they need, and forging that bond, that relationship. But what is the most common misstep or mistake that you see from fantasy managers that you'd love to see corrected?
Yeah, I think the most common mistake is from just blindly following advice, and not just advice, but also potentially consuming content wrong. And to be honest, also some of the content out there being not necessarily detrimental, but just being provided in a way that the top consumers are going to struggle with it. I'll give you an example. I see a lot of waiver wire articles where every week there's a player in there and the recommendation is to use your top priority or drop 50 to 100% of your fab,
Yeah.
right? And the top consumers of this content, who are in my opinion, the best players, because the more information you have and the more work you put in, the better odds you're giving yourself. Like poker, anyone can win, which is the beauty of the game, but the person that has studied the game and understands it better is going to increase their odds of winning. There are people out there that if you're just blindly following that article, you're gonna have no money left by week 3, right? Or if you're just reading a tweet that's like, oh man, this is my breakout guy, you got to grab him, and then you turn around and look at your bench and you drop Rico Dowdle because you want to pick up this like super
Right.
sleeper gem. It's like you're hurting yourself by blindly following advice and not understanding the game. And that's one thing um, that I have such a hard time with it. And it's where the most heartbreak comes from. The most heartbreak in fantasy comes from somebody that like does something they don't understand for a reason they don't understand, and then they look back, or even the league makes fun of them and says like, hey, why'd you do that? And then you don't want to turn around and say, well, I did it because I read an article or I saw a tweet. Like, it's just the most heartbreak comes from that. So it's why educating fantasy gamers is always going to be the best way.
You mentioned waivers in the context of educating fantasy managers. What's your typical strategy with waivers? Because I think the common thread amongst everyone that has come on here is they have said it is the weakest part of my game because there's so much that like you don't know how much to bid, you don't know
Right.
what your league mates are going to bid, you don't know what the usage is going to be. You can go out and spend 70% of your fab on Trey Benson, and then he gets injured that next week. There are so many things that go on there. So this episode is going to be coming out week 13 of the 2025 fantasy football season. Let's talk about your waiver strategy later on in the year. Like what does that typically entail? How do you look at players? Is it always on a team and position basis? Are you looking at playoff stashes? What is it for you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with waivers that even I now am getting a better grasp on than I used to have, especially with Fab, because Fab is actually still fairly new-ish, right, to a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, is league size and depth is so crucial. It is so, so crucial because if you're in a shallow 10-team league or whatever, then you can wait and hold your Fab. In a lot of these like industry leagues and stuff, like I'm in the Kings Classic, it's a 14 team, 20 round draft. Like if you don't spend your fab early on the breakout guys when they do come around, you're not going to ever use it because all the handcuffs are held. All the rookies are held. It takes an extreme circumstance for somebody to come out of the blue and be a later round breakout in something like that. I'm talking, you know, backup quarterbacks when someone gets hurt are the guys getting picked up off waivers. So you got to understand your league and your format in terms of spending on those kind of things. At this time of year, I'm really buckling down what my lineup looks like in the construction, right? So early in the year, and again, and this is my opinion, one of the most underrated skills out there is roster construction, right? Super underrated early in the year to balance startable guys with upside guys. Like so many times I see people go out and they draft 10 guys that look just like Christian Kirk. And their entire year is just nightmare start sits. And it
Dude, I
just
get that all the time. My
right.
friends are always like, "Hey, man, who's the guy that's just going to get me like 9 points this week? That's all I really need every week. Who's going to be the most consistent?" I'm like, "You're
Right.
going to consistently be sixth place in your
Right.
league."
And you know what's crazy though? You do need that guy every once in a while. That's the thing. You need
Right.
like a couple of those guys. But my favorite roster construction is to draft like a studded lineup and then have like one of those guys on my bench if possible. And then the rest of my bench is just high risk, high reward plays. So
Yep.
many times I see people just drafting a bunch of Christian Kirks. That guy's going to come in sixth. And then on the other side, you see someone that just takes only high risk, high reward rookies. And they do pay out. But I mean, I've got guys in leagues with me that I look at their roster and they drafted players that are great, that are going to be great. They drafted Travion Henderson and RJ Harvey and and Luther Burden and Jaden Higgins and all these guys. And boy, is their team going to crush it in the consolation bracket because they
Right.
they did not win enough games early on. So balance is so crucial early on. And then now as we get to the playoffs, I start shedding any of these guys that aren't getting a bigger role, that aren't right, that aren't showing it. Like Jaden Higgins last night, or sorry, this is coming out next week on Thursday Night
You're good.
Football, whenever it was. He showed that he can make plays. You know, Luther Burden's getting more work. I'm going to hold on to those guys. But all these like hopeful guys, like, and I know you're not trying to throw names around, but I'll throw around
Oh,
like
I don't care.
Trey Harris and Pat Bryant or whatever. Like I'm shedding those guys and I'm switching from a balanced construction to a matchup based construction for the playoffs. I'm looking at my tight end and I'm saying, is this guy going to go up against the Bills or the Eagles? Do I need a second tight end to patch that over? I'm looking at my defense. Is my defense going to play some brutal matchups here? How can I switch it, right? Quarterbacks, like this is where I'll actually be more likely to roster two defenses or two quarterbacks than any stage in the season because I want to make sure that I'm not only setting myself up for success, but I'm also blocking my opponents. So total change in attitude once we get to week 13 or so.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of context that fantasy managers need to have. Like, so when you go and you pick your team and you're taking these swings on the rookies like the Trevion Hendersons and RJ Harveys, Bashal Tutins, Jaden Higgins, a lot of these guys that don't end up breaking out till later, you kind of need to have that in mind. Like, if I'm going to draft this guy at this price point, am I willing to hold on to him for as many weeks as it takes, right? You don't draft Trevion Henderson in the fifth round and be like, well, after 3 weeks, it's not happening, so I'm going to have to drop him and pick up, Trey Benson or Amari DiMercado or something like that. especially as we get towards the playoffs here, you mentioned there's a shift in your strategy. What signals a sort of late season surge for a player? Like we're seeing increased usage for guys like Luther Bird and Jaden Higgins. You just mentioned those names. And what is the thing that sort of signals that to you where you're like, this is real versus no, this is just fool's gold. This is probably a 1 or 2 week thing.
Yeah. And for me, I need to be able to not necessarily need, but it's 90% of the time you need a catalyst. You need to identify what the catalyst is, right? Like it's easy with running backs. That's the number one. The starter got hurt. Now the other guy's playing more, right? The top catalyst there. But there's a lot of other ones. There's play caller changes, right? Think about rookie Amon-Ra St. Brown. They changed the play caller to Ben Johnson, and he started getting a bigger role. And around week 13, when this show is dropping, he started getting 10 targets a game because his role grew and the play caller changed and everything changed for him, right? So we're looking for those catalysts. We're looking for quarterback changes. We're looking for play caller changes. We're looking for injuries. We're looking for flat out just changing the role, right? I mentioned Jaden Higgins' name earlier. He was only playing in 2 wide receiver sets earlier this year because they taught him a handful of plays in a very specific type of role so that he could absorb that. And then now he's doing more 3 wide receiver sets and his role is growing. That's an actual catalyst for change. Whereas if we have a guy that all year has been playing 50% of the snaps and he continues playing 50% of the snaps, but he gets 8 targets, well, that's not an actual meaningful change that's going to continue and offer consistency. So that's why the underlying stats to me at times are more important than some of the surface level stats. Like if I see a guy get 5 targets in one game and 8 the next, but his snaps stay, I don't change anything. If I see a guy get 5 targets one game and he runs a 60% route participation, but the next game it goes to 80% and he gets 2 targets, I'll actually be more bullish on that player with the role change than I will with the target guy because I don't care about last week. I care about next week.
Right. Right. And that's the thing is like you need to see what these trends are going to be. Like what trying to project the following week is, it can always be hard, but like, for example, we keep dropping names and whatever. This is more of just examples.
Examples. It's all examples. Yeah.
But like we look at RJ Harvey a couple weeks ago where he has a 2 touchdown game, right? But the snap share didn't go up. It was the same usage. He just happened to turn that into 2 touchdowns. Now, I think to a degree, when the genie's out of the bottle, a player can earn more touches, but nothing from that game signified that his role should increase going forward. Now, you end up with the good luck, bad luck, whatever you want to say, where J.K. Dobbins gets hurt. You get R.J. Harvey in an expanded role, and that didn't bear a lot of fruit in the first week there with him out there. There's just Sean Payton. We could do a whole podcast on how brutal, Sean Payton is.
He's brutal. Just the way he puts guys in the doghouse and the smugness. I mean, good football coach, there's no doubt about it. But for fantasy football, absolutely ridiculously brutal.
Just a nightmare, man. Just a nightmare.
Some coaches are just there. Some coaches are great for fantasy. Some are terrible. I wish everybody would be like Sean McVay. Let's just give the ball to the same 3 guys and see what happens.
It's what a concept. Get the ball to your good players.
It worked. Giving the ball to one player. They won the Super Bowl giving the ball to just Cooper Kupp one year. So it crazy as it sounds, it does actually sometimes work.
Yeah, man. So I mean, speaking of getting the ball to good players, and we get frustrated with coaches, right? They're not always using players the way we want to. But sometimes we're saying, okay, it's a good matchup for this player, right? Even though they're not getting a lot of touches, or maybe this player is getting a lot of touches, but it's a really tough matchup. What is the thing you spoke about catalysts earlier? What's that thing, that catalyst that helps you make a start-sit decision on a weekly basis? Do you tend to rely more on your gut? Do you look at the strength of schedule, like the matchup? Are you looking at data? What is it for you that ends up being the thing where you say, okay, well, this player is more upside or this player is safer? Like, what is it for you?
Yeah. So for me, it really, you want to use information as much as possible. For me, gut instinct is the very last tiebreaker. Like if somehow it's so hard
because it's the first thing you feel.
Yeah. I'm actually at the stage in my career here where I will do things. I will acknowledge that I will do irrational things with my own lineups. I will. And and I know that it's detrimental at times, but I'm also a fantasy football player. So I will continue to start Kyle Pitts or whoever. because that is something that I'm just going to do. But when it comes to my advice, which is my job and I take very seriously, there's almost always enough data regarding the players, regarding the matchups, regarding the usage, regarding the weather, regarding what we've seen on film and with breakdown. And I do think that at one point, I originally, when I first started doing this, I thought all I needed to do is watch football, because I watch more football than anybody else. So it's all I needed to know. And then I made the switch to the first, and this is going to make me seem old here, but the first time A dot came out, I thought to myself, wow. I was like, how do they even calculate such a thing? Average depth of target? How are they?
This is going to change the world.
Who is jotting this down? Who's doing that? And it did kind of change the world, because it made you understand on the games you couldn't watch, like, why is one guy catching 5 passes and getting 50 yards? One guy's catching 5, he's getting 125. Well, this guy's running deeper routes, right? And now it's like, okay, we don't even got to watch football anymore. It's all stats. And then I finally came around to the truth, which is that stats with context is always going to be the best. And even watching the condensed game, unfortunately, is not enough sometimes, because you lose some of that information. You lose, like, okay, was this a hurry up situation? Like another example, Kenneth Walker scoring a touchdown when Zach Charbonnet been scoring them all year. Well, when you watch the full game, you realize it was a 2-minute drill situation, and they didn't have time to substitute, right? Whereas you lose that. And I'll admit this as well. And this is a take no one ever says. The longer version of the game with the broadcast and everything and the commercials is a better product. It's a more enjoyable product to watch. There's more tension. There's more buildup. There's oh, here we go. Here comes the third down. When you watch the condensed version, it's just play.
You're watching NFL TikTok.
Touchdown, basically. Extra point, play, feel. You know what I mean? It's just, it's not even. There's no romanticism to the game. So at the end of the day, once you've gone through all the data and gone through all the stats, and you actually understand what's going on by watching the film, you shouldn't have to rely as much on gut instinct. So in most cases, it boils down to that. And then if it is truly so close, and there are enough unknowns, which a lot of times there are enough unknowns, right? You know, one running back's been playing well, another comes back from injury, and you don't know who's going to get the ball. Then sure, go with your gut, because you have enough knowledge. You've done enough research to have the ability to try and use your gut instinct. And I hate the idea of like, oh, I'm an expert, so my idea, you know what I mean? Like I hate the term expert. I hate all that stuff. Right? I'm a professional writer. That's like my job. That's what I'm paid to do, and do shows and stuff. But like, I don't know that. So at the end of the day, for me, if you do enough research, then your gut is going to be data based and driven, versus just people that don't know what they're doing. They just say, here's what I think. That's a totally different thing. So for me, always going to be process based first.
You gave such a beautiful contextualized answer, but you also said the thing that is so incredibly relatable, which is that the advice that I'll give will always be data driven, based on so much research. And then I'll sit there and look at my own lineup and be like, why shouldn't I start Jaden Higgins as my wide receiver 2 this week? He'll pop off.
I do it all the time, dude. All the time, especially in some of these industry leagues and charity leagues. Sometimes I'll think to myself and I'll be like, you know what? Even when I'm drafting too, like, you know where I do it more than anything? The Scott Fish Bowl. I'll sit there in my draft and I'll be like, I'm not going to win this thing anyway. But if I do win it, I want to win it with this guy. I want to win it because I picked, you know what I mean? I built the team my way. Like, you should see how many tight ends I have because of the super tight end premium this year. It's like, if I'm going to win this, this is how I'm going to win it. You know? So sometimes you do irrational things like that. You just got to acknowledge that you're being irrational, and never pass that on to your subscribers. And I'll even ask them. Sometimes. I'll be like, you want to know what I would do with my lineup? Or do you want to know what the data says? Because like the data says you should start really this guy. And but for me, I would go out and I would do this because I am a psycho.
Right. Dude, that's a really, really good distinction. And something that, like, I've talked to people before is that sometimes you can just go and let your freak flag fly, like while you're setting your lineups and drafting players, because you do just want to have fun. But understand that, like, you having fun and you doing exactly what you want to do does not always lead to success. Much like life or your job or anything, you can do exactly what you want to do, and it might be a fun ride down. Right. but it's going to be a ride down. It's not a ride to the top.
The great thing about our members, say our core members, I'll give one guy a shout out here, our guy Mile High Luke, who is actually representing us this year in the Fans Classic, right? Like he's representing Fantasy Alarm, but he knows me well enough that in his questions, when he asks them in the Discord or on YouTube, he'll write BG for Big Gorilla, or he'll write Home League, right? And so I know when he writes BG, I know this is a $250 FFPC like very serious league, right? And I know, and also tells me it's tight end premium because it's Big Gorilla, right? It's like he knows that it's like, okay, like Home League play it, yeah. The Big Gorilla is the best name for the league, dude. Like, and I actually asked them, I was like, well, how'd you come up with the name the Big Gorilla? And they were in a meeting, right? And because the old sponsor left and they needed to come up with a new name, and one of the guys, I think it might have been Eric Bachman, was like, all right, we got to address the Big Gorilla in the room here and figure out what this is going to be called. And somebody goes, you just did it.
There it is.
Yeah.
There it
Big
is.
Gorilla. Such a good name.
That's amazing. Dude, the best things happen by happenstance, just like
best,
that, where you're just not even trying. You're just not even
unbelievable.
trying.
Yeah.
So we've talked about like a little bit of everything here, but I know that something that is very individualized to each analyst is their own rankings. Some analysts love to do rankings purely on upside. Some will go through projections and say, these are my data projections. This is what it is. Others just don't even do projections. They'll be just like, yeah, I like this guy better. Just go with him, right? I always talk about it being like a language. Like everyone is speaking a different language, and you sort of have to have the Rosetta Stone to understand, as horrible as this might sound, you have to have a Rosetta Stone to understand what each analyst's language is as a fantasy manager, because someone can look at my rankings, your rankings, and we might have the same player ranked totally different, feel the same way about them, but then there's a context that you like the upside of that player better, or I really dislike the situation, but I understand there's upside. So how do you try to interpret fantasy rankings each week or in the draft, or even let's talk, dynasty? What are some of the factors that come into it for you?
Yeah. Now I'm gonna say something here, and not to be offensive with it, but to me there are three levels of content, and rankings are the lowest level. And this is coming from somebody who does the rankings at Fantasy Alarm. Okay, so I do the ranking. If you go and
it's just a list of player names. Right. Like there's no context to
if you click weekly rankings, then you get my rankings. I spend more time on that than any other piece of content that I do. So I'm allowed to say that I believe that's the lowest form of content, because it's just a big list with no context. The second level of content are the articles and podcasts, which are basically like a textbook. Right. So like if you just give somebody rankings, you're giving them the answers to the test, and they might pass a few tests, but they didn't learn a damn thing. If you give somebody a textbook, they can take that and they can read it, or they can absorb it like a podcast like this one, and they can learn from it, and then they're going to know some things. And the highest level of content, in my opinion, is the interactive content, where the teacher comes over to your desk and you got the textbook there and they say, hey, what's going on? What's confusing you? How do I fix it? And those are the shows we do every day at 1:00. I'm live and we're given the information, and you can pop in and say, hey, what do you think about this? What's going on with this? And we just answer it live right there, or in the Discord where we give custom advice. Right. So it's like, that's always good. A conversation is always going to be the highest level of education for teaching somebody something. Right. For the rankings, I actually became so frustrated with the idea of them that is where yin and yang tight end came from, because I hated this idea of putting together just a list every week that was, here's the guy, here's everybody, and this guy versus that guy, because sometimes you do have a guy that gets 4 to 5 targets every week and he runs a 4.9, it's Jack Doyle, and he's never going to break off a 40-yard player ever. And you're basically just banking on catches, and you're never going to get a 100-yard game, and you might get a touchdown, you might not. And then there's another guy who is just like a complete freak athlete, but some games he gets 1 target, some games he scores 3 touchdowns. This is once again George Kittle I'm talking about. And like, how do you rank those guys back to back? So that's why I came up with that, which is basically there's the standalone tier is the top tier, guys that have great floors and great ceilings, and that you're only benching for bye weeks or injuries, right? And then after that, what I would do is do one list of guys that are safe, that you can start, that give you a floor, and then a whole list of guys that are high risk, high reward to put on the bench. And that was a way for us to kind of navigate the tight end situation and say, okay, if you wait on tight end and you draft 9 straight running backs or wide receivers, you can have an extra tight end on your bench. You can afford to do it because it's your weakest position. And we kind of went through that way. So for me, and people don't even know this because I try to get it out there, but we do dynamic tier rankings, which is essentially yin and yang tight end for every position, for quarterback, running back, wide
Oh, that's
receiver.
cool.
Yeah, so you can build so there's a whole list of Christian Kirks on one side, and there's a whole list of Luther Burden's on the other side, and you can build a balanced lineup. There's 24 wide receivers. Every league starts minimum 2, right? So you can get your studs and then try and build your bench of like, okay, I'm going to need somebody that's going to keep my team afloat, but then the rest is all going to be upside. So that's kind of how I try and do that. With rankings, though, I do it the same way with my linear rankings. The first 5 or 6, and again, I'll use tight end as an example because it's my favorite position. The first 5 or 6 guys are just going to be the chalk best players, the best guys, the highest floor, highest ceiling, and then the next group of guys is going to be based on upside. Because if I'm setting my lineup and I have to spot start a guy or I have to put whoever in there, I might as well give myself a chance at upside. And then I'm going to have the boring guys, and then I'm going to have more complete dart throws. And then after that, you're going to have like Noah Gray, where it's like, yeah, you're going to get 2 targets and they're going to do nothing, So Elijah Higgins will be in there. So it's like, that's how I do it. And somewhere in there towards the bottom will be Taysom Hill.
The people need to know, where's Darnell Washington?
Yeah, he's right in there. That's it. Yeah, that's the only answer I can give you on that.
He's in there.
He's in there. He's in there. He's in there, not that far away from Johnny Smith and Pat Frymouth. They're all right in there, buddy. Right in there together. And throw your dart, man. That's that crew. Arthur, thank you, Arthur. Arthur Smith, dude, go away. Go away.
Arthur Smith, Sean Payton, Josh McDaniels. I feel like they all just like get together in the off season and they just think of fun and interesting ways to screw things.
Yeah. How do we make everyone hate us? Dude? How do we make everyone hate us? There really is, like, we should make a list. Next time we do a show or get together, let's make a list of the good versus evil. Right? We'll have the good side. Yes. It'll be like Sean McVay and Liam Cohen and right, and just like the guys that are willing to start start Bucky Irving or just use the same 2 guys, and then we'll have the evil side. You
need like it's a fantasy Legion of Doom. We'll make a list, and you just never draft players from there. That's it.
Yeah, so simple. For real though. I mean, I honestly, as crazy as it sounds, I've started to do that as a tiebreaker in Dynasty. No joke, with GMs. I will get to a point with the GMs where the ranking, like you got a bunch of running backs picked in the 4th round, right? Just a bunch of running backs 4th round. There's you can go through and split hairs all you want. At the end of the day, nowadays, I look at myself and I say, was this guy drafted by Les Snead? Was he drafted by Brad Holmes? Right? Was he drafted by James Gladstone? Or was he drafted by Mickey Loomis? You know what I mean? Like, was he drafted by, Jerry Jones, Duke Tobin? Like, I go through and I'm like, who actually knows ball? Like, Brad Holmes won back-to-back GM of the year for a reason. This group coming from Les Snead, all from the Les Snead side, I mean, they are the ones that found Cooper Kupp, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua. Like, so of course I'm going to draft Isaac Tesla. Like, the guy's probably going to be at least decent if these guys, group of guys are finding these guys. Howie Roseman, whoever he picks, right? Like, so I am starting to use that again. It'll never be my number one, part of my process. Draft capital will. People hate people hate that, but like it is the most predictive stat. So I'm sorry, but like, I'm trying to factor those things in because for years, I mean, not to go off on a crazy rant on this, but for years we said whoever Bill Belichick drafts at wide receiver, we're going to fade, and we were right to do so. So why wouldn't every single time, right? So why wouldn't we do the flip side? Why wouldn't we say, hey, you know what? I think this team is actually really good at evaluating talent. Why don't we start drafting some of those guys? Steelers wide receivers for many years. Like, I think that should be part of the tie-breaking process in a game where there's a lot of uncertainty, which is dynasty rookie drafts.
Dude, I never apologize for going deeper onto a topic. Like, I was going to tell you this at the end. I might as well say it now. This has been one of the most comprehensive and in-depth conversations I've had. You've given so much context to decision making, whereas like a lot of answers I get, they're not bad answers, but it's just yep, this is my decision. This is why I do it. And you've gone so far in depth that I actually like, I do think that both the audience and I have learned a ton in this discussion that we've had here. I feel like it is a little bit of like what you're talking about, and pat myself on the back and you on the back for this show. I do think this is some of like the higher form of content where we can really get into the nuts and bolts
Well,
of the
that's what you
game.
said
But
you
like,
wanted to do today, right? You said you wanted to.
yeah,
That's why I'm apologizing for
I
dropping player
you
names. I thought we're going deep, and I know
you're delivering, dude.
you've had a bunch of great guests on. I know you had Tyler Oginski on, who was the number one
Hmm.
ranker last year. So, like, I'm sure you guys covered rankings with the best already. So, I'm trying to give you a little bit of inside baseball on some other stuff. So let's go. Fire it
I,
up, dude. Let's
I
learn. Let's learn a little something. Look, hey, level 3 content. Let's go level 3
yes,
content here and teach some people some stuff.
I love this, dude. I love this. And I've only got two questions left for you. Actually, one is a question, and then one is you actually get to ask a
Oh,
question.
great.
So, last thing that I have for you is, what's one underrated skill that you think every fantasy manager needs to be successful? Like, there's always that thing that separates a good from a great fantasy manager. What is that one skill for you?
Yeah, so I actually touched on it briefly, or maybe I forget, maybe in depth. But the number one thing that the skill that everyone needs to hone, in my opinion, is understanding roster construction. Understanding roster construction big time. That's going to help you in every facet of the game. And one thing I didn't touch on earlier in this context, right, is building balance versus upside is trading. If you understand how to build a roster, not only are you going to build your roster better, but you're going to know how to communicate with people and trade with people because you'll understand their roster as well and what they need versus what you need, right? Like I had a trade earlier this year that I did with Jake Seeley where, he understood.
Hate that guy.
Yeah,
Absolutely hate that guy.
yeah,
The
fully
worst.
agree, fully agree. But he understood my roster and I understood his, and the trade was very easy to do because we had basically I had a ton of wide receivers, he had a ton of running backs. We just looked at each other's rosters and said, okay, very similarly ranked guys in DeAndre Swift and Jalen Waddle, and let's just make the swap. You know what I mean? And that swap has worked out great for both of us because Waddle at the time was a guy that was on the start sit decisions for me. And for him,
Hmm.
same with DeAndre Swift. Now these guys are in our lineup every single week. And, a bunch of my wide receivers got hurt. So I'd love to have Waddle back now. Like,
Right.
but I had so many wide receivers at the time because I had Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brian Thomas Jr. And I had Cortland Sutton, who is on bye this week. And I had Michael Pittman, who was on bye last week. And I had Rashad Bateman, who got hurt. So all of a sudden I don't have any wide receivers anymore. But at the time I had quite a few, as you can tell. But yeah, I mean, like, we understood each other, right? And once you understand roster construction in that part of the game, it's so much easier to communicate with people. And I wrote an article last year that actually won FSWA Article of the Year. Not a whole humble brag there,
There we
but
go. There we go.
the
Get it out there.
3 books for the fantasy trader that once you understand and empathize and sympathize with your league mates instead of trying to rip them off, you're going to get a lot more deals done, and you're going to get deals done that actually help you. And it's okay to help them too, because the end goal for you is to have the best team. Whatever happens with them doesn't matter. Like unless you're turning their team into some unstoppable super force, then whatever. But if your team is bad, you're never going to have a chance anyway. So like, understand how to, the sort system, start opportunity, roster talent. Understand when you need to push the chips on your lineup and when you can afford to trade for Travion Henderson and RJ Harvey and wait for them to break out. And once you understand roster construction, that's the very basics of it. You'll understand how to trade. You'll understand which guy to target on waivers, right? Do you go for the 1 week spot start? Do you need Andre Yosivas for a 1 week Jamar Chase suspension game? Or are you not even going to use that guy? Did you just waste a bunch of money on a guy you're not using for the 1 week he's viable, right? Like, do you need a handcuff for your running back who's now nicked up, right? Like, say you're relying on Josh Jacobs or somebody, and he gets banged up. Like, you got to understand roster construction first, and once you understand that, all the waivers, all the trades, you'll be staring into the matrix, man. It's all ones and zeros.
Dude, I think you hit right there is the biggest gap between people that play fantasy football and a lot of the guests that I have had on this show, because every single guest has talked about that as being the thing that they hang their hat on when it comes to trades, which is actually making a fair trade, understanding and, like as you said, empathizing with your league mate and making this a real conversation. Because so often I see, hey, did I win this trade? What do you think? Did I win? Did I get the
Right.
better guy? And
Impossible.
it's
Impossible question.
we
Unless you put your entire,
never
unless you
know.
put both in our Discord, I say post both the rosters, and then I actually
Mhm.
can look at it and say, you know what, that's an exactly perfect trade because it's within context. Yeah. And the thing with fantasy analysts that people got to understand is that we have to have some sort of context to our trades because no one will trade with us, dude. No one ever
Yeah.
trades with me. No one's traded me a tight end or gotten a tight end from me in a trade in Dynasty in half a decade because nobody wants.
Wow.
Because I can't give them. I've been trying to give them away, and especially my buddies from home, they're like, "Nope, you're up to something." And I'm like
Yeah.
explaining to them how it's helping them and how it's helping me, and they're like, "Nope, you know something." You know something about George Kittle? I'm like, no, I literally.
How far could you possibly go? Could you be like, here's my Trey McBride for your base shell too? And
I
they're like,
think
absolutely
I think
not.
that's even if I did that, they would literally spend the next 2 hours scouring to see what injury Trey McBride has or what possibly, you know what I mean? Like they that's just my buddies from home for sure. But like in the
Yeah.
industry leagues, yes, of course we're all, we trade with each other. No one's scared to trade. But yeah, it's like you get that stigma. So you got to get to the level of providing somebody with some context for the trade, and it makes people excited about trading. The worst thing you could do in your dynasty league is go in and just rip somebody off and be like, haha, I won, you lose. No one's gonna want to
Right.
play with you, dude. No one's
Ever again.
and you're hurting people's feelings, you're making them feel uncomfortable. If you want to play that way, go get a faceless, soulless, high stakes orphan team on FFPC or somewhere and do that. Not that that's a bad thing, but like if you want to play that way and be, the Wolf of Wall Street, right? Or, then
Yeah.
go
Be a
out.
shark, man.
Yeah, if you want to be
Go
a
for it.
hostage negotiator, then go do it over there where you're not hurting anybody's feelings, like everybody's doing the same thing over there. Don't do it in your office league and you're like ripping off Gretchen. Like nobody wants that, dude.
That's how you get called into HR.
Exactly. Did you can you imagine that conversation though? It's like they're like, did you steal Jonathan Taylor from Gretchen for a bunch of scrubs?
Right.
It's because she's been crying all afternoon.
You said her Brandon Ayuk, Chris Godwin.
Come here. Yeah, right. Like we're gonna have to write you. You should be written up by HR for that. So yeah.
Yeah. Even arrested. Who knows?
Even arrested. Yeah, someday. If we have our way, someday you will be arrested for that.
Someday we'll put it into laws.
Right.
All right, man. So this has been great, but now you get a chance to ask a question. And normally with this one, I don't typically have the next guest lined up because we just kind of put feelers out. But I know who the next guest is going to be, so I actually get to ask you this question with some context. So if you could ask one question to our next guest, Mr. Jay Felicio.
Oh, that's great.
What would that question be on the show?
Okay, what day does this drop?
These are going to drop every Monday or Tuesday.
But will it be during December?
Yours gonna be week 13. His will be week 14. That's
Oh, perfect. All right.
It'll
Here's what I want you to ask Jay, because I know Jay is a man with a wife and kids.
Oh boy.
Jay, what's a good last minute small gift a la stocking stuffer that you can get for your significant other that they think that's going to be great? Because I think that question not only helps me, but I think it's going to help a lot of our listeners. It's going to help a lot of our listeners. So ask him. I want to know, what is your go-to stocking stuffer to get the wife or for any significant other?
I love it. I'm writing this down right now.
Right. Ask him that,
stuffer.
and I will listen. I will listen because there's never enough. There's never enough good ideas. I asked Grok earlier today, and it's like Grok doesn't even know my wife at all. Unbelievable. I was like, "What's a sentimental gift to get my wife?" He's like, a vacuum. Like, get out of here, Grok. So I'm asking Jay, what stocking stuffer, dude? No price limit.
Okay. All right. That's gonna bring people back too. Like this is multi-level thought
I'm
process here. This is
definitely
layered
coming
marketing.
back. I'm definitely coming back. I need that more than anything. I'm all set with the fantasy stuff. I need that. That's what I need bad.
Coop, man. Coop. Finishing off with a banger here. Coupe Fiasco. All right. Let everybody know where they can find you on socials, what you got going on in the fantasy space or anywhere else.
Yeah, so on the Twitter machine, X, whatever, Coop A Fiasco, CoopAFiasco. On Reddit, Coop, there it is. Coop, there it is. And then you can find all my content on Fantasy Alarm, our Fantasy Alarm YouTube. I'm live every day at 1 o'clock, doing everything that I said that I would do here. We do Mondays, all nerdy stats. And then Tuesdays, waivers, Wednesdays, trades and DFS, Thursdays, start sits. And then Friday, I always have a guest on just to get their perspective. And then Sirius XM, we have a show every day, 6 to 8. I'm on Thursdays and Fridays, and also Sunday morning, Sirius XM, 10 to 11. So just pretty much live all the time.
So really not a lot of work.
Just live all the time, just constantly live.
You really don't talk a lot.
No. Well, we're trying to help people, man. And during the season, you gotta be consistent, brother, and you gotta give the people what they need to win. And that's the goal for Fantasy Alarm, and I know it's the goal of football guys too. Can I give you guys one more plug? So when I talked about the level of content, when I say that rankings are not enough, like Dave Kluge is sitting here and he's doing something about it, right? That new article he has where he has rankings with context in there when it's necessary is bringing that from level 1 to level 2 content. And that kind of stuff is what football guys, it's what Fantasy Alarm, it's what a lot of these places are trying to do to make you better at this game. And that's why it's worth subscribing to Fantasy Alarm, to football guys, because if you take this game seriously and you like to have fun with and actually interact with good folks, then you got to be part of those communities. So get in there and do that. So big shout out to you guys. Shout out to Kluge. That's a big move by him. I really like that. I'm probably gonna steal it.
Probably gonna steal it. It's a great way to punctuate the show.
No, I'm not stealing.
Cool
I think
move,
that's
gonna steal
cool
it.
move. Gonna steal it. No, I think it's a good way to do rankings. I think it's a great way to do them. So I put notes on my stuff anyway, but I just love that he's doing that. So he deserves a shout out, man.
It's too late. I already got the caption for the thumbnail.
Probably gonna steal it.
Probably gonna steal it. Well, man, this has been awesome. Hopefully we were able to give people some level 3 content here with plenty of context, plenty of thought-provoking words. You were honestly a fantastic guest. It's gonna make the whole intro that I do on the side a lot easier to bring this into the show, man. Thank you so much for joining me, and to everyone that is watching or listening. Can't thank you enough for watching or listening all the way through here. For myself, for Coop, see you next time. Adios.